Imagine being the last of your kind. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally the last. 40 ships, 40,000 people, the dying remains of an entire civilization packed into rusting hulls held together by prayers and desperation, crawling through the dark between stars with a hunter behind them that had never, in 300 years, once stopped. That was the Velinar, and the only place left in the galaxy that hadn't already turned them away was a small, young, barely spacefaring world on the edge of the outer spiral arm. Earth. Commander Aryen stood at the viewport of the Wandering Hope and stared at that blue-green marble like it was the last ember in a dying fire. She had been awake for 31 hours. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten. Around her, the bridge crew, 8 people where there should have been 20, moved in exhausted silence. She pressed her palm flat against the cold viewport glass. Please, she thought, just this once. Let something go right. The hail came through before she could rehearse her speech a final time. A human face filled the view screen. Captain Henry Walsh. Dark uniform. Silver markings. Eyes that were serious, but not cruel. Aryen had learned to read cruelty in the faces of commanders. This wasn't it. You have entered the Sol system without authorization. Please state your intentions. Aryen straightened. Her translator implant hummed softly behind her ear. Captain Walsh, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. My name is Commander Aryen of the Velinar Remnant Fleet. We are not here to threaten you. We are not here to take anything. We are here because we are dying, and because you are the only civilization in this galaxy that has not yet learned to be afraid of us. Walsh's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. How many survivors? He asked quietly. 40,312, Aryen said, as of this morning. A long silence stretched across the stars between them. Then Walsh leaned forward slightly. Stand by, Commander. The screen went dark, and in that silence, Aryen did something she hadn't allowed herself to do in years. She waited. She hoped. What happened next would change not just the fate of the Velinar, but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. Because humanity didn't just answer. Humanity showed up. The wait lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of silence, so heavy it had weight. Aryen didn't leave the bridge. Neither did her crew. They sat at their stations, running diagnostics on systems that were barely functional, watching the oxygen recycler cycle numbers that got smaller every day, listening to the quiet hum of a ship that was slowly forgetting how to stay alive. Khalees, her communications officer, the young one, the one who still looked like he should be in school somewhere, kept glancing at her. He wanted reassurance. She had none to give. Then the screen lit up again. But it wasn't Walsh this time. The face that appeared was older. A woman. Silver-streaked hair, pulled back tightly. A uniform with more markings than Walsh's, and eyes that carried the particular weight of someone who made decisions that affected millions of people. Commander Aryen, I am Secretary General Mara Osei of the United Earth Assembly. I've been briefed on your situation. Aryen said nothing. She had learned that silence was safer than speaking when powerful people were about to make decisions about your fate. I want to be honest with you, Osei continued. What you're asking for is not simple. 40,000 refugees. Alien biology we don't fully understand. Ships that may be carrying pathogens our immune systems have never encountered. And you've told us there is a hostile fleet, the Corax Dominion, that has been hunting you for 3 generations. She paused. That means if we take you in, we may be taking in their enemy. And everything that comes with it. Aryen's hands tightened around the railing. Yes, she said. That is exactly what it means. Another pause. Aryen braced herself. She had heard this speech before. On 7 other worlds. The math never worked out in the Velinar's favor. They were too dangerous to help. Too much of a liability. Too much trouble. Every civilization in the galaxy had decided the Corax weren't worth making an enemy of, not for 40,000 dying refugees from a dead world. But then Osei did something none of those other leaders had done. She turned away from the screen, clearly speaking to someone off camera. Get me the Joint Defense Council. And contact the shipyards at Titan. Tell them we need an emergency capacity assessment. She turned back. Commander Aryen, I'm not going to promise you safety. I don't know yet if we can give you that. But I am going to promise you this. We will not make this decision based on fear. Aryen felt something crack open in her chest, something she had sealed shut a long time ago. We'll need 48 hours to prepare proper receiving protocols, Osei continued. Medical screening, atmospheric compatibility checks, temporary habitat coordination. Captain Walsh will escort your fleet to a safe holding position in the outer system. And after 48 hours? Aryen asked. Osei looked directly into the camera. After 48 hours, Commander, welcome to Earth. The screen went dark, and for the first time in 11 years, Commander Aryen of the Velinar Remnant Fleet sat down, slowly, quietly, and pressed her face into her hands. She didn't cry. She had forgotten how, but her shoulders shook for a very long time. What she didn't know yet, what none of the Velinar knew, was that while Osei was making that call, someone else was already watching. Somewhere on the far edge of the Sol system, past Neptune, past the scattered debris fields, past the invisible boundary where human sensor networks thinned out into silence, a single ship sat completely still. No running lights, no emissions, no signal. Watching. It had been there for 9 days, long before the Velinar arrived, waiting with the particular patience of a predator that has hunted the same prey for 3 generations and has learned that patience is the sharpest weapon of all. Inside that ship, a Corax intelligence officer named Veth transmitted a single compressed data burst back toward Dominion space. The Velinar have found refuge. Coordinates attached. Awaiting orders. The reply came back in 4 hours. It contained 2 words. Do nothing. On Earth, the 48 hours move fast. Faster than anyone expected. Faster, perhaps, than any refugee response in human history, because humanity, when it decides to act, acts with a particular brand of chaotic, loud, overwhelming energy that the rest of the galaxy had never quite witnessed before. Aryen watched it from her viewport in stunned silence. Shuttle after shuttle rose from the surface. Not military ships, supply ships, haulers, transports, vessels packed with food synthesizers, portable atmospheric processors, medical equipment, water recyclers, and what appeared to be, she asked Khalees to confirm this 3 times, prefabricated housing modules. They're building shelters, Khalees said, his voice barely above a whisper. For all of us. Before we've even landed. The human medical teams came aboard the Wandering Hope first. They wore environmental suits, but they moved without hesitation. They worked quietly, efficiently, without the nervous energy Aryen expected from a species encountering alien biology for only the 2nd or 3rd time in their history. One of them, a young woman with dark eyes and steady hands, stopped beside a Velinar child who had been sick for 3 weeks. A little girl named Sova, 6 years old, the last surviving member of her entire family. The human doctor knelt down to Sova's level. She couldn't speak Velinar. Sova couldn't speak any human language. So instead, the doctor simply held out her hand. Palm up, fingers open. Sova stared at it for a long moment. Then she placed her tiny, 4-fingered hand into it. Aryen had to look away. She stared at the view screen instead. At Earth. At the lights beginning to glow across the night side of the planet as cities woke up and people who had never met a Velinar in their lives began making room. But somewhere in the back of her mind, in the part that had kept her alive through 3 generations of running, a warning was quietly sounding. The Corax didn't give up. They never gave up. And Earth had no idea what was coming. The Corax Dominion had destroyed 11 civilizations. Not defeated them. Not conquered them. Destroyed them. Wiped them from star maps so completely that younger species sometimes debated whether they had ever existed at all. The Dominion didn't want territory. It didn't want resources. It wanted submission, and when it didn't get submission, it settled for ash. 11 civilizations. Earth would have been the 12th. The first 6 months passed quietly. The Velinar settled into temporary habitats on the lunar surface and in orbital stations above Earth, while permanent housing was constructed below. Human engineers worked alongside Velinar architects, neither fully understanding the other's methods, both stubbornly refusing to stop trying. The results were strange. Beautiful sometimes, buildings that blended floating Velinar design principles with the sturdy, almost aggressive practicality that seemed to run in human blood. Aryen walked through one of those structures on a cold morning in the third month and felt something she hadn't felt since she was a child on Valara. She felt still, not safe. She wasn't ready to use that word yet, but still, she was learning English, slowly, painfully, with a stubbornness that made her young translator laugh. Secretary General Osei visited the settlement twice in those first months. She never came with cameras. She never brought press. She came with engineers and doctors and agricultural specialists, and once, memorably, a very confused but enthusiastic team of human children who had apparently petitioned their school to be allowed to visit and ask questions. Sova, who was recovering, made friends with 3 of them immediately. Aryen watched from a distance and allowed herself, carefully, to exhale. Then the intelligence report landed on Captain Walsh's desk. She found out about it because Walsh came to her directly. No intermediary. No diplomatic cushioning. He walked into her office, set a data tablet on her desk, and looked at her with those serious, steady eyes. "We picked up an encrypted Corax transmission 9 days ago," he said. "We've been working on the decryption since then. Our analysts finished an hour ago." Aryen looked at the tablet. Her translator rendered the decoded message slowly. Her blood went cold. "The humans have taken the Velinar in. The Assembly has authorized military protection. Dominion High Command has reviewed the situation. Earth is no longer a minor civilization. Earth is now a target. Dispatch the 5th Expansion Fleet. Estimated arrival, 14 months. Aryen looked up at Walsh. He wasn't panicking. That was the thing that struck her most. This man had just learned that the most powerful war machine in the known galaxy had pointed itself directly at his planet. And he wasn't panicking. He looked almost focused. "I think," Walsh said quietly, "it's time you told us everything you know about how the Corax fight." Aryen told them everything. She talked for 11 hours straight. She told them about Corax fleet formations, the wedge pattern they use to split defensive lines, the way their command ships always positioned themselves exactly 40,000 kilometers behind the front, protected by overlapping shield grids that no Velinar weapon had ever successfully penetrated. She told them about their communication systems, their supply chains, their boarding tactics, their psychological warfare strategies. She told them about the worlds that had tried to fight back. She made herself describe what happened to those worlds afterward. Walsh's team listened to every word. A room full of military strategists, weapons engineers, xenobiologists, and intelligence officers, all of them silent, all of them taking notes with the focused intensity of people who had just been told the clock was already running. When she finished, the room was very quiet. Then, one of the engineers, a compact woman named Dr. Vasquez, who had barely looked up from her tablet the entire time, said simply, "Their shield grid, the overlapping frequency pattern. That's actually a vulnerability, not a strength." Everyone looked at her. If you hit both shield emitters within the same 0.3-second window, the overlap doesn't double the protection. It creates a resonance cascade. The shields cancel each other out. She looked up from her tablet. "You just need to be precise enough to do it." Aryen stared at her. In 3 generations of running, through 11 different star systems, through dozens of desperate last stands that never lasted long enough to matter, not one Velinar weapons specialist had ever identified that weakness. This human had found it in 11 hours. 14 months. Earth moved like it had been preparing for this its entire life. The shipyards at Titan ran 24 hours a day. New vessels, faster, heavier, built around the vulnerabilities Aryen had described, took shape in the dark above Saturn's rings. Human governments that had argued for decades about defense budgets suddenly found remarkable agreement when the alternative was extinction. The Velinar helped. They shared everything: weapons schematics, sensor data from 30 years of running from Corax fleets, detailed records of every engagement they had ever survived and everyone they hadn't. There was no hesitation, no diplomatic negotiation over what to share and what to withhold. They had nothing left to protect except the future. And in return, humanity did something that still made Aryen stop, sometimes in the middle of ordinary days, stunned by the simple enormity of it. They gave the Velinar land, not temporary habitats, not orbital stations, actual land, a region in the southern hemisphere, green hills, wide rivers, open sky that turned colors at sunset that Aryen had no words for yet in English. A place called New Valara, named by humans for a world they had never seen in honor of something they had only ever heard described. Sova ran through that grass on the day they arrived and laughed so hard she fell down. Aryen stood at the edge of the settlement and pressed her hand against a real tree, rooted in real soil, and felt the bark rough against her palm. I will not let them lose this, she thought. I will not let the Corax take this too. She turned back toward the military compound at the settlement's edge. There was still work to do, because in exactly 33 days, the Corax 5th Expansion Fleet would cross the outer boundary of the Sol system, and everything humanity had built in 14 months was about to face something that had never once, in 3 centuries of conquest, been stopped. They came out of hyperspace like a wound tearing open in the fabric of the universe. 217 Corax warships, arranged in the perfect wedge formation Aryen had described, command ships hanging back exactly 40,000 kilometers behind the front line, just like always, shield grids overlapping in the precise pattern that had made them untouchable for 300 years. They had destroyed civilizations with this formation. They had done it so many times they no longer even considered alternatives. That was their first mistake. Admiral Kira Sato stood on the bridge of the UNS Resolute, Earth's flagship, fresh from the Titan yards, still smelling of new welds and cold metal, and watched the Corax fleet materialize on her tactical display with the expression of someone who had been waiting a very long time for exactly this moment. All units confirm weapons ready, her tactical officer reported. Confirmed across the fleet, Admiral. Target acquisition on primary shield emitters? All 217 vessels tagged. Dual emitter lock confirmed on each. Sato clasped her hands behind her back. Let them make the first move, she said quietly. I want the whole galaxy to know we didn't start this. The Corax commander's hail came through 30 seconds later. Aryen had warned them about this too. The Dominion always announced itself. It was part of the ritual, part of the theater of absolute power that had worked so well for so long. A voice filled the bridge, deep, resonant, translated by systems Aryen herself had helped calibrate. Humans, you have made an error in judgment. Surrender the Velinar remnants and withdraw your fleet. Do this now, and your world will be permitted to continue existing as a subject state of the Dominion. Refuse, and you will be the 12th civilization we remove from this galaxy's history. Sato let the silence breathe for exactly 5 seconds. Then she leaned toward her communications panel. This is Admiral Kira Sato of the United Earth Navy. We've heard your offer. A pause. No. What happened in the next 4 minutes would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for the next 200 years. The Corax fleet surged forward in their perfect wedge, the same formation that had shattered every defensive line ever put against them. Their shield grids powered up to full overlap, creating the impenetrable interlocking barrier that had made them feel invincible for 3 centuries. The human fleet didn't retreat. It didn't scatter. It did something the Corax had never seen before. It split, cleanly, precisely, like a hand opening, each vessel peeling to a pre-calculated position that had been mapped out over 14 months of preparation. And then, from those positions in coordinated firing windows, so tight, they had required entirely new targeting software to execute. Every ship fired simultaneously, not at the Corax hulls, not at their weapons, not at their engines, at both shield emitters, on every vessel, at the same time, Within a 0.3-second window, the resonance cascades began like small stars dying. Shield grid after shield grid collapsed inward. Not broken but cancelled, each vessel's own protection turning against itself in a catastrophic feedback loop that the Corax had never known existed because no enemy had ever survived long enough to discover it. In 4 minutes, 60 Corax vessels were disabled. In 4 minutes, the myth of Dominion invincibility, 300 years old, cracked apart like glass. On the bridge of the Wandering Hope, which Aryen had refused to leave despite every argument Walsh had made, Khalees turned from his console with an expression she had never seen on his young face before. Pure, disbelieving, trembling joy. "Commander," he whispered, "we're winning." Aryen gripped the railing. Her knuckles were white. Her eyes were burning. "Not yet," she said. "Not until it's over." Because across the battlefield, the Corax commander was doing something that made her blood freeze in her veins. Something she had never seen the Dominion do before in 300 years of conquest. The command ships were moving forward. In 300 years, the Corax command ships had never moved forward. They didn't need to. The front line always did the work. The command ships existed to direct, to observe, to remain untouchable behind their screen of warships, symbols of absolute authority floating safely at the edge of every battle they had ever won. But 60 of those warships were now drifting, dark, disabled, and the Corax commander was angry. Aryen recognized what this meant before anyone else on any ship in the human fleet. She had spent her entire life studying the Dominion, not out of fascination, but out of survival. She knew their doctrine down to its bones. When the command ships moved forward, it meant one thing. They're not trying to win anymore. They're trying to make sure we lose. "Walsh," she said, opening the fleet channel without hesitation. "The command ships are breaking formation. They're going to target your civilian infrastructure, Earth, the settlements, New Valara." A beat of silence. "How certain are you?" Walsh asked. "Completely," she said. "This is what they did to Velinar. When the battle turned against them, they stopped fighting the fleet. They went straight for the ground. They burned everything we loved, so that even if we somehow survived, we'd have nothing left to come back to." Another silence. Shorter this time. "Admiral Sato," Walsh said. "You heard her." Sato's voice came back immediately, already moving. What followed was not elegant. It was not the clean, precise, perfectly coordinated strike that had shattered the Corax shield grids. It was something messier and louder and more desperate, a running battle across the inner Sol system as human vessels broke pursuit in every direction, racing to intercept Corax command ships that were faster than anything the intelligence reports had suggested. 3 human ships were destroyed. 7 more were badly damaged. The Corax pushed hard, harder than they had pushed in decades. Because something had changed inside that fleet the moment their shields failed, something psychological, something fundamental. The Dominion had built its entire identity on being unstoppable. And now they had been stopped, they were afraid. And afraid enemies, Aryen knew, were the most dangerous kind. The battle for the inner system lasted 3 hours and 40 minutes. It ended not with a single decisive blow, but with a slow, grinding, brutal series of engagements in which the human fleet simply refused. Refused to break. Refused to scatter. Refused to give ground. Every time a Corax command ship drove toward Earth, something was in its way. Every time one tried to flank, another human vessel was already there. Aryen stayed on the bridge of the Wandering Hope for every minute of it. She watched the tactical display with her heart lodged permanently in her throat. She watched human ships take damage that should have destroyed them keep fighting. She watched crews that had never faced the Dominion before hold positions that 3 generations of Velinar soldiers had abandoned. She watched, and she could not speak, and she could not look away. The Corax commander made contact again 4 hours after the battle ended. His voice was different this time. Aryen noticed it immediately. The resonant authority was still there, but underneath it, something had shifted, something that sounded almost impossibly like recalculation. "You have demonstrated unexpected capability, the commander said. Yes, Sato replied. We have. The Dominion does not forget engagements of this nature. Neither do we, Sato said. Go home. Tell your high command what happened here today. And tell them this. The Velinar are under Earth's protection now. Permanently. Any fleet that enters this system again will meet the same response. Except next time, we'll have had even longer to prepare. A long silence stretched across the void. Then, the Corax fleet, or what remained of it, turned and left. Aryen walked out of the Wandering Hope for the first time in 4 days on a morning that smelled like rain. She had been transported down to New Valara while she slept. Walsh's doing, she suspected. She stood on a hillside above the settlement and looked out across the green valley below. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children ran between the new buildings. Somewhere below, she could hear Sova laughing at something. The sky above her was blue and enormous and completely, impossibly still. Walsh appeared beside her after a while. He didn't say anything immediately. He just stood there, looking at the same valley, hands in his pockets. They'll come back, Aryen said quietly. Eventually. The Dominion doesn't abandon objectives. I know, Walsh said. We need to be ready. Stronger than today. The shield vulnerability only works once. They'll have adapted their systems within the year. I know that too, Walsh said. A pause. We already have people working on what comes next. Aryen looked at him. He was almost smiling. She thought about 11 civilizations that had faced the Corax Dominion and been erased from history. She thought about Valara's crystal oceans and floating cities and gardens that stretched for hundreds of miles. She thought about 40,000 people packed into dying ships with nowhere left to run. She thought about a human doctor kneeling down and opening her hand. She looked back at the valley, at the smoke rising from cooking fires, at children running in grass under an alien sky that had somehow, impossibly, become home. You know, she said slowly in careful, hard-earned English, when I first saw this planet, I thought we were asking you to save us. Walsh waited. I did not understand, Aryen said softly, that we were going to save each other. The wind moved through the valley below them. The smoke rose. The children ran. Somewhere above, in the dark between the stars, the galaxy had just learned something new about a small blue-green world on the edge of the outer spiral arm. Earth didn't just shelter the broken. Earth forged them into something the Dominion had never once encountered in 300 years of conquest. Earth made them family. And family, as the Corax were about to spend the next century painfully discovering, was the most dangerous thing in the universe.